Hi there, I'm Devlin Eden from CoachParry.com, and today we're going to go through our mobility series. This is going to be a whole body mobility series, and really we do recommend you do this every day. It's not taxing on the body, you're not going to get tired as though you would maybe from a strength training session. This is something we recommend doing every day before your runs, before your strength sessions as a good warm-up method, and it's really going to help with range of motion throughout your body around all the joints. Let's get straight into it. So our first one we are going to work through is what we call our mobility flow. So the mobility flow, we are going to stand with your feet together. Take a nice deep breath in, arms above the head, gently bring those arms back down and try and get the hands to the floor. Now while I'm doing this, I can already feel I'm a little bit tight in the hamstrings. If you are a little bit tight, you're welcome to bend the knees slightly. Hands down to the floor. You're going to walk your hands out so that your bum is still high up in the air as what we call the downward dog. Push the hips back, and then with the right leg, we are going to bring that right leg forward. All right, so you really want to try and extend that right leg as far as you can. Get the hips nice and low, and make sure that the heel is pressured on the floor, so you don't want to be riding up onto the front toe. Knee is straight up, so you don't want your knee flaring out to one side. Knee up, left hand stays anchored on the floor. Then bend the right elbow. You want to try and get that right elbow as close to the inside of your right foot as possible. Hold it there for a second, and then with that right arm, you're then going to lead with your elbow and point your hand up into the air. Make sure that that knee stays upright. Make sure the torso rotates. Look at your hand and come back down. It is important that you're not just throwing the arm back. I really want you to focus on a big torso rotation. Look up, come back down. From here, you are then going to just put your back knee or your left knee on the floor. Sit yourself upright. With the right leg, you can straighten the right leg out in front of you, and then hands on the floor, and we're just going to push your bum backwards. So right foot, toes pointing up towards the roof. Stretch the hamstring, lean back, hold it for a second. Then from there, bend that right leg again and get your body upright. We're now going to move into the left hip flexor. So from this position, leaning the hips forward. So you should feel hip flexor stretch on the left side. Still keep the heel on the floor on the right leg. Left arm up into the air and hold. Hold. From there, we're going to put both hands on the floor. Kick the right leg back into that downward dog position. Push the heels down and walk your hands back into a standing position. All right, that's one side of the body. We're going to then do the other side. As we do the other side now, I'm actually going to show you the left side from the side so you get a different angle. So I'm going to just move my mat. So from the side, exactly the same thing. We want to focus feet together. Deep breath, arms up, and breathe out. As we breathe out, come down, hands to the floor. Walk those hands out into that downward dog position. From here, we're going to bring our left foot forward. Again, driving that heel into the floor. Right hand on the floor. And get the hips nice and low. You don't want to have your bum pointing up in the air. Nice and low from here. If you struggle in this position, as a regression, you're welcome to put the back knee on the floor. Ideally, you want to try and progress a little bit to be able to keep your knee up. Remember, keep the leg nice and straight. Then with the left arm, I'm going to get my left arm as close, or left elbow as close to the floor as possible. From that position, left elbow lead, left hand up. Again, a big torso rotation. Reach for the sky, look. You're going to then hands to the floor. Put the right knee on the ground this time. Lean back, straighten the right leg with the toes pointing up to the roof. Hands on the floor and push the bum back. Feel that hamstring stretch. Hold it there for a second. And then bend the right leg, body upright. Have a look at the shape of my body, shoulders back, chest out, and just push the hips forward. I've still got my left heel on the floor. I'm not riding up onto my toes. You don't want to be leaning over. Keep the body up. Feel that right hip flexor stretch. Right arm up into the air. Hold it for a second. We're going to then come back, both hands on the floor. Get up into that downward dog position again, pushing my heels down to the ground, and walk my hands back to my feet and stand up nice and straight. That's our mobility flow. That's the first exercise. So now that I've warmed up, we'll get into our second mobility movement. This is the world's greatest stretch, as we call it here at Coach Parry. We did it in the mobility flow. This time we're going to isolate this as its own exercise with a couple of reps to it. So we're going to start off. Right foot, take a nice long stride forward for me on that right leg. You're going to place your left hand down on the floor. With this one, again, you want to really get your hips nice and low. If I just show you this quickly from the side view, you want to have your hips really low. You don't want your bum up in the air, and you want your heel on the floor. As I mentioned earlier, if you do struggle with this position, you're welcome to put the back knee on the floor as a regression. There's nothing wrong with that. It's really about getting more range of motion. So if you need to be in this position, go for it. Then I'm going to just come back to a front on view. So knee up, hips nice and low. Remember, we want the right knee or the front knee to be vertical. So it's pointing straight up. You don't want the knee flaring out to one side, and dig that heel into the floor. Then with the right arm, I'm going to bend my elbow, and I want to try and get my right elbow to the inside of my right foot or as low as I can. Hold it there for a second or two. And then with that right arm, lead with the elbow, hand up towards the roof. Watch this knee does not dive out. Hand up to the roof, eyes following your hand, and you're going to come back down again. Elbow as low as you can. Hold it for a second or two. And rotate up into the air. You are going to do 5 to 6 of these on each side. Keep watching that knee, making sure nice big torso rotation, so you don't want to just be throwing the arm back. Get the eyes following the hand, and 5 to 6 rotations on each side. All right, for exercise number 3, we are going to do what we call a yoga squat to pike. Now, this one does become a little bit more tricky, especially if you do struggle with some mobility in the hips. So there are ways to make this a little bit easier in terms of the movement. What I'm looking for, I'm going to just move my mat backwards. What I'm looking for is we are going to stand with your feet wider than your shoulder width apart. So not your typical squat position. We are going to go a little bit wider apart. You can even have your toes pointing out to the side slightly. Now, if you do struggle with hip mobility and getting nice and deep into a squat, you are welcome to take a book or two and place it underneath your heels. So by just lifting the heels up slightly does allow for better mobility and better range of motion. But feet nice and wide apart, toes pointing out slightly. And then what we're going to do is down into a deep squat or a sumo squat or the yoga squat. And you want to get nice and low, all right? Shoulders back, body upright. You don't want to be leaning here and leaving your bum up in the air. Get your hips really low. And with your elbows, dig your elbows into your knees. So what you're trying to do is really push your knees apart so you can feel the groin and the adductors stretching. From there, you're going to hold it for a second or two. Then grab onto your toes. And holding your toes, we move into the pike position. So lifting the hips up and straightening the knees. So now we should be feeling the hamstrings stretching. Obviously, you're going to work within your limit and your range. So if you struggle to get completely straight, go as straight up as you can. Hold it there for a second or two. Come back down into that squat and push the knees apart. Hold it there for a second or two. Grab onto the toes and pike, trying to straighten those knees. Remember, with any warm-up or any mobility type of work, we're trying to increase range of motion. So with each rep, try and get a little bit more range. Try straighten the legs a little bit more. I'm going to show you this just from a side view. So into that squat, nice and deep. So again, shoulders back, my body upright, knees push apart, grab my toes, and then lift the hips up into the air. Try and get those legs as straight as you can. Hold it for a second or two, and back down, and repeat. Push the knees apart. This exercise, you want to do 6 to 8 reps. Remember, nothing is fast. It's a slow, controlled movement. And focus on range of motion. Focus on good body position and good technique. Exercise number 4. Focusing still on the hip mobility, what we call knee drops. So you're going to take a seat on the floor for me. So down on your bum, knees bent at 90 degrees. And you want to try and position your feet about shoulder width apart. Now, there's going to be 3 stages to this. Now, when I say 3 stages, I mean 3 variations. I'm going to start off with the most basic variation and then talk you through the other advances or progressions. This, again, is not a case of you need to try and, well, we obviously want to try and get better, but there's no harm in you finishing a run, for example, yesterday. Today your hips are feeling a little bit tight, a little bit sore, for you to regress to the basic version again. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to focus on mobility. You don't want to be trying to hurt yourself and push through any discomfort. So the first variation, or the base part of this movement, feet shoulder width apart. You can place your hands on the floor behind you. And the idea here is to push your chest forward. So we really want to try and get your body nice and tall and upright. And then from there, all we're going to do is drop both knees to the right. So keep the torso pointing forward. Both knees, you want to try and get those knees as close to the ground as possible. You can have a look at how wide my feet are. I didn't move my feet. So my left knee comes to the inside of my right foot. Hold that position, keep pushing the body up. And then from there, keeping your feet anchored, you are going to just roll across to the other side. All right, still pushing upright, and we'll keep moving side to side, and you're going to do 10 knee drops each way. Now, if you struggle with range of motion and you can only get your knees to there, that's okay. This will improve with repetition and the more you do this. Don't try and force it past that position. Obviously work within your limits initially. The second variation to this movement is exactly the same, but now what you want to try and do is keep your hands off the floor. So this will be a progression. Hands off the floor, pushing that chest out, keep the body nice and tall, and doing the exact same movements. Try keep your chest pointing forward, and keep the feet anchored and rocking side to side. A common mistake I often find with this is as people drop one way and want to move the other way, they start to just swing their feet side to side. You want to try to keep your feet nice and anchored, push the chest out upright, and rock side to side, trying to keep your bum on the floor and really just loosening those hips. The third variation now becomes a little bit more complicated. So same starting position, body upright. We are going to, let me just move my mat back slightly. You are going to drop the knees to one side, and preferably without using your hands, you want to now come up onto your knees. So you want to drive the hips forward into that position. So hips off the ground, body upright, drive those hips forward. So you should feel the hips stretching a little bit. Hold it there for a second. Slowly back to the floor. Don't move the feet as far as possible. Rock the knees to the other side and drive up onto your knees. hips forward, body upright, shoulders back, and down. Rocking side to side, repeating, constantly focusing on driving those hips forward. For each of these variations, you're going to do 10 reps on each side. That's not to say start with variation 1 times 10, 2 times 10, 3 times 10. You are doing one variation of the exercise. That's it. 10 reps. If you are able to do the second variation, do the second instead. If you are able to do the third, do the third instead. You don't have to worry about doing the other 2 variations. For the 5th exercise, we are going to do a deep yoga squat again, this time focusing on a bit of torso rotation. All the focus we're doing here focus largely around our trunk and our hip mobility. So, again, for that yoga squat, the feet are wider than shoulder width apart. Feel free to turn your toes out slightly. When I say turn your toes out, don't go and point your toes left and right. Just a slight angle out. We're going to start off into that deep yoga squat. So again, shoulders back, get the hips really low, and you want to hold this position. Then, left hand, I'm going to place my left hand on the floor, and with my right hand, starting from the ground, we are going to then do a big torso rotation. So trying to really turn the chest side to side, get the arm up in the air and the eyes following the hand. As far as possible, try not to drop this left knee or drop your hips to try and get up to that motion. Also, don't just throw the arm back. Torso rotation, hold it there for a second, come back down to the floor, and then rotate to the other side. Trying to keep a good squat position, weight on the heels, back down, and rotate and alternate sides. And you are looking to do 6 to 8 reps on each side, really focusing on rotating that torso, keeping the weight on the heels in a good squat position still. Exercise number 6. We are going to do some adductor or groin mobility. So, starting off, down onto your left knee, body upright, and you're going to kick your right leg out to the side. Focus on trying to keep your right leg as straight as possible. You're not positioning it like that. Out to the side, toes pointing forward, and try and get that right foot to be nice and flat on the floor. So you want to roll that ankle to the side, placing both hands down on the floor in front of you. The real focus here is to make sure your back is nice and flat, chest pointing out towards the ground, and then from there, just leaning back, pushing the bum backwards to the wall behind you, and you should feel a good stretch in your adductors or in your groins, so the inside of your hamstrings. Feel that stretch. Remember, keep the body nice and flat. I will show you this from the side in a second, but if you round your back and you just sit back, you actually don't feel any stretch. So you really want a nice flat back, lean back slowly and hold the stretch. Don't bounce up and down. Because it's quite a sensitive stretch and sensitive muscle, you don't want any sharp jerking actions. So hold it, back nice and flat. 3, 2, 1, and then gently come forward. And you can rock again into that position. Hold, and you can do 5 to 6 of these on each side. I will show you this just from a side view. So this time doing the left side. So I'm on my right knee, left leg out to the side. Nice and straight, hands on the floor. Again, the focus is on the back, chest out, nice and flat. As I mentioned, you don't want your back rounded when you sit back. You're not going to feel anything. So back nice and flat, toes pointing forward, and from here, push the bum backwards. Feel that stretch so you go to where your limit is. You'll hold 3, 2, 1, and gently rock forward. Again, pushing back, hold, 3, 2, 1, and rocking forward. And again, looking for 5 to 6 on each side, slow, controlled, gentle motions. Exercise number 7, we are going to do or refer to what we call the cat-camel stretch. Why, you ask? You'll see. So, starting off down on your knees, you're going to then place your hands on the floor, all right? So you're in a nice tabletop position. Focus here has to be that your knees are directly below your hips, so you don't want to be out that far. So knees directly below hips, hands directly below your shoulders. So you're actually quite tucked up. You're in quite a tight position. From here, so we'll start with the cat stretch, all right? So what you want to do is you want to drop your chest and your lower back down towards the floor and get your eyes looking up. So we're rounding, really focus, try not push your bum backwards. You want to just tilt the hips, look up, low arch in the back, hold, 3, 2, 1, and from there into the camel stretch where you now push those hips or tilt the hips forward, chin on your chest and breathe out, and you want to try and round your upper back. Hold, and then cat stretch, so looking up, arch the lower back, and rotating the hips and chin to the chest. Guys, it's important here that when you arch the lower back, when you're doing the cat stretch, you're not doing a cat and leaning back. And for the camel, you also don't want to be leaning back and moving your hips back and forth. Technically, this position stays exactly the same, and it's a rotation on the pelvis more than anything else. All right, we'll use this as a combo, so we'll go cat stretch first, then camel stretch, and you can do 10 of these combinations straight after each other, slow and controlled, up and down. For exercise number 8, we're going to do some thoracic mobility. So again, sticking with the torso. So starting off, getting down on the hands and knees again. All right, so again, knees below the hips, hands below the shoulders, up nice and tight. From here, I'm going to take my right hand, and you want to drive or thread the needle, so your right hand coming underneath your left arm. This time you really can push the bum backwards or the hips back. We're going to get nice and low, threading the needle as much as you can, so it's a rotation in the torso. Hold it for a second or two. Try and get this right shoulder as close to the floor as possible. Hold it for a second or two, and then come back up and rotate to the other side. Push the hips back. Try get that shoulder close to the floor. Hold and back up. Repeat to the other side. So we're going to keep alternating sides, and you can do 10 to 12 of these rotations for me on each side. Remember, push the hips back. Try and get that shoulder down to the floor. If I just show you this, what it looks like from the front. So again, in that nice square tabletop position, right arm, we're going to thread as far underneath the left shoulder as possible. Try to get the right shoulder to the floor, hips back, hold, and then up, and thread across to the other side. Try to get that shoulder down, hips back, hold it, and up, and you are repeating 10 to 12 reps on each side. For the 9th exercise, we are going to do some ankle mobility work. Now, you're going to start off, I'm down on my right knee with my left leg up and trying to focus on a good 90-degree angle. Same with my back leg, 90-degree angle on the knee, body upright, and then you want to make sure that we are driving the front heel into the floor. So the focus is here to always have the heel and the ball of your foot flat on the floor. At no point in this motion do you want to come up onto your toes and lift your heel. So that's the first focus. From here, gently, just leaning forward. So keep the heel flat, but you want to rock forward as much as you can before that heel comes up off the ground, and then gently rock yourself backwards. So we're just doing the mobility on the front ankle. So lean forward and backwards, nice and controlled. It is very important that this is a slow movement. You don't want any fast bouncing action because it does start to put a little strain on the Achilles. So you want to make sure just nice and gentle, leaning forward and back upright. You are going to do 12 reps of this, but we're going to add a variation to it. So for the first 5 reps, I'd like you just to gently rock back and forth. As I mentioned, keep the body upright and try and avoid leaning on your leg. So that's the first 5 reps. For the next 7 reps, you are then going to lean on your left leg. And the idea here is just to add a little bit more weight, a little bit more resistance, and then the same movement. Gently rocking forward, keeping that left heel on the floor, and back up. Rocking forward, leaning into that leg a little bit, and control back up for the next 7 reps. Guys, I do want you to try and focus on working within a threshold. What I mean by that is some of you might struggle with ankle mobility, so you might feel a little bit tight. You might also feel a little bit of pain here and there. If there's any pain, you work within that range threshold. I definitely don't want you to be pushing. You feel a bit of pain, but you think, I can go a little bit further because that'll loosen it up. It won't. You are risking injury that way. So nice and controlled, working within a threshold and slow and controlled movements. For the final exercise, we've pretty much been working from head to toe. For the last exercise, we're going to just do a little bit of mobility in the foot itself. All right? Very similar to some of the exercises we do in our foot core programs, but this one particular exercise, really simple, focusing on a little bit of big toe mobility, or what we call the big toe lift. So if you've been wearing shoes, take your shoes and socks off for this exercise. If you've been barefoot, you're good to go. Take a seat on a chair, sitting up nice and tall, all right? And what you want to do is you want to try and focus on, firstly, your lower leg or your shin to stay vertical. At no point in this movement do you want your leg rocking side to side. You want to try and keep the lower leg nice and still. You want to make sure that you're focusing on keeping the ball of your foot. So if I just show you the side, the ball of your foot needs to point into the ground or push into the ground the whole time. Staying nice and firm, foot solid. All we're going to do is our 4 smaller toes. You want to keep digging into the ground, and we're going to just lift the big toe up as high as you can. Hold it for 3, 2, 1, and relax. Again, notice my leg does not move. The first thing you want to tend to do is as you lift that big toe up, the leg often wants to roll out to the side. So keep that lower leg still, lift up, 2, 3, and relax. All right? Some of you might struggle initially to isolate your big toe. If you struggle to lift just the big toe, and as you lift all the toes or your foot wants to come up off the floor, that's okay. We are going to do 15 reps on each foot. So we'll do one foot at a time. But for the first 5 reps, what you can do is hold these 4 toes down and just isolate that big toe. So big toe up, 2, 3, and relax, and continue doing that. What will happen then is that'll start sending feedback to your brain on how it feels to isolate that toe, and that neuroreceptors will then start after 5 reps, after 5 reps, if you remove your fingers, ideally your toes should be able to stay quite flat and just that big toe isolating. So first 5, if you need to, hold the toes down and just isolate that big toe. And for the next 10, you're going to just lift, 2, 3, and relax. Nice and controlled and relax. And you're going to do 15. So that is our mobility series on each side. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you are welcome to do this every day. You are welcome to do this as part of your warm-up routine. I know it does take a little bit of time. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get in all the movements. And you just need to obviously plan if you are going to be doing this before a run as part of your warm-up. Really good to try and get range of motion. You'll start to feel those improvements in the hips, in the shoulders, in the torso particularly. This is vital. We do recommend this at least once a day. Just 1 or 2 things in terms of the tempo. I spoke about how many reps to do. Everything needs to be slow and controlled. I'd like you to think of a metronome, where if you're going up at a certain pace, come back down at a certain pace. Nothing should be sharp, jerking actions, nice and controlled movements throughout and up and down at the same steady rate. Enjoy the session, hope you see the benefit in it, and I'll catch you in one of our strength classes.